I'll have to confiscate it.
Go ahead. Take it from me.
What is going on, guys? Rogue TCG here, bringing the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG deck profile you all voted for, and I'm very happy to be bringing it to you. Here is Dogmatika Ritual. This deck is a lot of fun. I said that about a lot of my decks, but I really mean it about this one. This deck is a ritual deck, and its win condition is very... I don't want to say it's something that you wouldn't really expect, but it's something that your opponent definitely isn't really going to expect, especially when the previous way this deck would play in previous times was in conjunction with other archetypes in order to do anything other than ritual summoning. So I don't want to keep yapping about what I hope this deck can do. Let's just get into the card by card and you can see it yourself. Starting off, we're on triple Dogmatika Ecclesia the Virtuous. You can't be destroyed by battle with a special summon monster from the extra deck. Keep that in mind. A lot of these Dogmatikas are going to have some sort of protection from extra deck monsters. The main thing is if the monster special summon from the extra deck is on the field, we can special from our hand. And if it's normal or special, we can add a Dogmatika card from our deck to our hand, except for itself. And then we're locked out of the extra deck for the rest of the turn. This card is just our starter. We normal summon it, or if we can special summon it, we special summon it. And we just get to add a card. Pretty nice and simple effect there. We're on one copy of Dogmatika Maximusi. This card is very powerful and it's our main combo enabler in the deck. This card reads, we can banish a Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Link out of our graveyard to special summon this card from our hand. And then during our main phase, Ignition, we can activate the effect to send two monsters with different names from our extra deck to the graveyard, and then our opponent will do the same from their extra deck to their graveyard. And then we're locked out of the extra deck for the rest of the turn. Now, this actually is a little bit of a hint on what our win condition is. Once we get to the main card that our win condition revolves around, I will go into it in a little bit more detail and backtrack back to these cards. But Maximus is very powerful, allowing us to send two cards from our extra deck to the graveyard, which is our main resource, funny enough. Typically, for most decks, either the hand or our graveyard is going to be our resource, although in our deck, it's actually going to be cards in our extra deck, because every single card in our extra deck has some sort of effect when it's sent to the graveyard. Primarily Herald of the Arclight being able to add either a ritual monster or a ritual spell from deck to hand when sent to graveyard, or Elder Entity Intest being able to pop a card on the field. Not even face up, it's just better than Dryden. We also have other cards like Aggregator, which can negate face up monsters. We have Thespian Lulu with Lilith, which is able to special summon a monster from our deck during the end phase. And then we have the Tri-Brigade plus the Garura in order to send the Tri-Brigade to then send the Garura to then draw a card if we need to send it off of something like Punishment. And then, of course, the Titaniclads and the Grongignon, just for some context in reference to what we are able to send to the graveyard. Next, we're on two copies of Dogmatika Fleur-de-Lis the Knighted. During the main phase of a monster, special summon from the extra deck is on the field. Quick effect, we can special summon from our hands, kind of like a hand trap. Then if we control another Dogmatika monster, we can negate the effects of one face-up monster on the field till end of turn. Now, it's non-targeting negation, sure, but it does require some sort of setup. So this card, in theory, can special summon itself out during your opponent's first turn of the game. However, you won't actually really be able to do anything except for just get it out of hand. Now, that's not the worst thing in the world, especially given its second effect, which when a Dogmatika monster declares an attack, you can make all Dogmatikas you can currently control gain 500 attack, and that's a permanent boost. But it does do a little bit less than wanted, so this card's a lot better when paired with another Dogmatika. But we are just playing two of it because that attack gain actually does allow us to push some thresholds, plus it is interaction when we're going first, and we do have a Dogmatika set up on our board. That's it for our main deck effect monsters, or as I believe Rada calls them, Pringles. Now let's go on to our rituals. We're on two copies of White Relic of Dogmatika. You can ritual this with Dogmatikabre, although we're most likely not going to. If this card is ritual summoned, you can target two face-up monsters on the field. Make one of those monsters gain attack into the other monster's attack. Level 8 or higher Dogmatika monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle if a monster is special by battle, period. They just can't be destroyed by battle. So keep that in mind. And if a monster is special summoned from your opponent's extra deck, except during a damage step, you can look at your opponent's extra and send a monster from it to the graveyard. Now, here's where we really get our first big hint on what this deck's win condition is. This deck's win condition is ripping out your opponent's extra deck and trying to make sure they don't have any resources in it at all. And this deck is actually pretty damn good at doing that. We can talk numbers once we get to the big boy. But White Relic of Dogmatika being able to functionally have like that Boral Sword effect where you get to steal monster's attack and put it onto one of your monsters is pretty damn kosher. Like, it's really good, especially since that attack gain is a permanent attack gain. So this actually does allow us to push for OTKs with a single hit, especially, again, with our big boy. Once we get to him, you'll be able to see why we're able to push for so much numbers. But White Relic of Dogmatika is quite strong, primarily because of its level. I'm going to be completely honest. Its effect is kind of middling. It does help out our game plan, but not to the extent where we would really like it to. However, it is a level 4 Dogmatika Ritual monster, so that's incredibly relevant for one of the cards. I believe it's the card that's actually directly underneath of it, so once we get to that, you'll understand why. Run 1 copy of White Knight of Dogmatika. This is mostly here for an extra Dogmatika Ritual, to be completely honest. This card isn't very good. So let's just read it, and it's a level 8. You can Ritual summon this with Dogmatic Calamity. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck, period. So if this card's on field, you just can't special from extra. If your opponent activates a card or effect, except during the damage step, you can send 1 monster from your extra to the graveyard, and if you do, look at your opponent's extra, and you get to send 1 from their extra to the graveyard. This card gains attack equal to half the combined attack of those monsters sent to graveyard until end of this turn. That might seem good until you look at its attack stat and you realize it's a 500 attack monster that's a level 8. And its effect actually doesn't interact with our opponent in the slightest. It just rips a card out of their extra, although we do get to send 1 out of ours, so that can be interaction depending on what we send. Either, again, a negation with Aggregator or a pop with Intis typically is the most we can really react to our opponent. However, this card is very middling otherwise because it is, again, it's an 8, so it's pretty unfortunate in that level there. However, it does send a card from our opponent's extra, so it does further our game plan to a degree, so we are just playing it for the additional ritual. The big boy himself, Dogmatika Albazoa. Cannot be ritual summoned except by Dogmatic Calamity or another Dogmatika card effect. Dogmatika monsters you control are unaffected by the activated effects of your opponent's Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and Link monsters. During our main phase, we can make our opponent choose and apply one of these effects. You in these effects mean your opponent, which is very interesting phrasing, but let's just read it out. For every 2 cards in your extra deck, they have to send 1 card from our hand or extra deck to the graveyard, or they can return all Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and Link monsters they control to the extra deck. Now, that doesn't seem too good, especially since you're giving the opponent the choice of choosing which one they would like to do. However, if you are going first, and your opponent does not have any Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, and or Link monsters to return to the extra deck, they actually don't have a choice. They have to send cards from their extra deck or hand to the graveyard based on the number of cards in their extra deck. Now, let's say in theory your opponent will start at 15. If we summon Albazoa, that means they have to send 7 to the graveyard. Yeah. They can't always pitch cards out of their hand to the graveyard, but hand looping them is even better. So, there's that. But Albazoa being able to just rip half their extra deck straight out of them, sure, they get to choose which ones they get, so they might actually have some beneficial effects. But those beneficial effects are going to be outshined by the fact that they don't have a fucking extra deck. They don't have one. Which is very funny. So we can remove half their extra deck there. And then in theory, White Relic of Dogmatika will remove the 8th card. And then Maximus remove the 9th and 10th card, leaving them at 5 cards. Then whenever they activate a monster effect during their turn, White Knight of Dogmatika is going to mill their 11th card. And then once we get to some more cards, you'll see some more rip cards. But you can see how that becomes really critical, especially for some decks that need a critical mass of cards in their extra deck. Being left with only 4 or 5 cards in their extra deck after they were not able to perform any actions is debilitating, like for some decks. Now, maybe not for all decks. Like a deck like Tenpai, they're chill. They're cool. Except for the fact that we get to rip a card out of their extra with White Relic and I believe White Knight. Yeah, and White Knight as well. Both White Relic and White Knight, we get the rip. So it's kind of like Kashtira Unicorn in that sort of effect. But that's enough yapping about that win condition. I spent enough time on that. We're on triple copies in a Deer Servant, able to send a monster from our extra to the graveyard, and then add a Dogmatika monster or Albaz from deck or graveyard to hand that is attack less than or equal to the monster I sent. Now, notably, if we send something like Herald of the Arclight, which has 600 attack, we really can't add anything. 15, 25, 15, except we can add White Relic of Dogmatica, which is 500, and then another 500, which is why we're actually playing 2, as well as another reason why we're playing White Knight of Dogmatica, because we can add these if we need to be able to send our Herald of the Arclight to the graveyard. We're on triple copies of Dogmatica Matrix. When this card is activated, we can add a Dogmatica Ritual or a Dogmatica Ritual spell from our deck to our hand. Then if our opponent controls a monster, we can add a Dogmatica card from our deck to our hand. So it just adds 2 cards if we're going second, which is nice. Otherwise, it's just Rhoda for our rituals. And then also, once per turn, if you control a Dogmatica Ritual, you can look at either player's extra deck and send 1 monster from it to the graveyard. So here's the rip number 12. So we can leave him at 3 cards. Now, notably, one of these is not like the other. We're White Knighted Dogmatica. We need to respond to something to rip a card. Although Matrix is both a starter and a way to start our combos by dumping an extra deck card, a way to interrupt our opponent's board by, sending an end test or something, or even ripping cards out of our opponent's extra to disrupt them. So the flexibility is just so nice. Now for our ritual spells. We're on 2 copies of Dogmatic Calamity. I mentioned this a little bit earlier in reference to White Relic of Dogmatica. This card can be used to ritual summon any Dogmatica ritual. You must also tribute monsters from our hand or field whose total levels equal exactly the level of the ritual monster you ritual summon, or send 1 monster from your extra deck to the graveyard whose level exactly equals the level of the ritual monster you want to summon. And then for the rest of the turn, you can't special from the extra. So, with White Relic, like I mentioned previously, we can go Intis or Arclight to summon our White Relic. Or we can go White Knight of Dogmatica and we can send something like a Titaniclad or a Grunginyal to the graveyard. Or if we go Dogmatica Albazoa, we can send exactly Despian Lulu Walilith to the graveyard, since it is exactly a level 12. So we do have all these different options for Dogmatic Calamity, and also the effect that allows us to send from extract to the graveyard is good enough where we're playing more of this than the other one, even though the other one is listed on all the Dogmatica rituals. Speaking of Dogmaticabre, here it is. This card can be used to ritual summon any Dogmatica ritual monster from our hand or graveyard. You must also tribute monsters from our hand or field, or banish fusion or synchros from our graveyard whose total levels equal or exceed the level of the ritual. And if both White Knight of Dogmatica and White Relic of Dogmatica are in the field, we can look at either extra or of either our opponents, and then send a card from it to the graveyard. So another way to rip a card. Now, this is going to be a lot less likely having both the White Relic and the White Knight on field, because that typically means that we don't have Albazoa on field, because both of these ritual effects are a hard once per turn. So we can only realistically get 2 of these guys out on our turn 1. So we got to kind of pick and choose what we want. So because it mentions these 2 specifically and not this one, it's a little bit less good. But the fact that we can banish our resources that we sent to the graveyard earlier to, gain advantage in some other way, again, like Arclight, like Intis, we can banish it for our rituals. It means we're never actually paying the cost for our rituals. We're just activating a spell and getting the ritual monster out, instead of really having to tribute any ritual monsters at all. That's it for our ritual aspect of the deck, except for preparation of rites. You'll see it when we get to it. It'll be real quick. We're on triple copies of Dogmatica Punishment. We can target a face-up monster opponent controls, send a monster with equal or higher attack from our extract to the graveyard, and pop that face-up card. Until the end of the next turn after this card resolves, we cannot special from the extra deck. A little bit more of a harsher restriction on this one, although if you've played against this card, you'll know this card is plenty powerful. So we're playing 3 copies of it. We're on a Bestial engine. Bestials are very good this format, both in countering Fiendsmith related decks as well as Yubel specifically. Although as the metagame changes, you may find that these aren't as good, in which case you just replace them with basic hand traps, to be completely honest, except for the ones that are already included. Stuff like Effect Veiler and Ghost Mourner are quite good, as well as Ghost Bell, I believe, has been seeing a little bit of a reappearance, although I might be incorrect on that one. But we are on 2 copies of Bestial Lubellion, 1 copy of Bestial Magnamut, 1 Druisworm, and 1 Baldrake. Now, realistically speaking, they can't add anything in the deck, specifically Magnamut. However, these cards are just really good for grindy games in general. They're really good into the meta, as well as the 1 copy of Branded Regained, where we get to, if we banish our cards from our extra deck with Cabre, we are able to banish them again with our Bestials, something like Intis because it's a light, and then we can go Regain to shuffle that Intis back into our deck to draw a card. Also, Brandy Regain gives us a very unfair advantage against our opponent's SP Little Knights, because if they choose to tag out, we can shuffle their SP back into their extra deck so they don't get their SP back and they have to remake it. We're on 2 copies of Pre-Preparation of Rites, being able to add a level 7 or lower ritual from deck to hand, and then if we have a ritual spell in graveyard, we can add it back. Really nice option there. 2 copies of Triple Tactics Thrust, being able to add Nadir Servant Pre-Preparation of Rites. And our next card, Triple Tactics Talents, is very powerful. The Triple Tactics Talents, as previously mentioned, as well as 1 Call by the Grave for hand trap mitigation, and then triple copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, and triple copies of Infinite Impermanence. In the extra, I already briefly went over it all. 1 Grand Guignol. This is also able to just summon out this Despian Lulu Lilith as well. So, very funny interaction there. Otherwise, it's just a card. We can also kind of debate our opponents, or if you wanted to cut one of these cards in the extra, specifically like Dynamondo is like the one odd one out, you can cut it for something along the lines of Proskinian or Queritus. I personally prefer Proskinian, although Queritus is quite good, if we haven't locked ourselves out of the turn with something like Dogmatika Punishment. Or we use this before we do Punishment, you know, there's always that. The Titanic Cloud is able to either special Dogmatikas or add Dogmatikas at end phase when it's sent to the graveyard. Again, I already went over this. This is just here to send this because it's a large attack, being 3,500 in reference to Dogmatika Punishment or Nadir Servant. Garura draws us a card. Aggregator's a negation when it's sent to graveyard. Pops. Wing Pegasus is like a weird protection effect, which is quite nice. Herald of the Arclight adds our rituals or ritual spells, and then Proskinian is able to bring back stuff from our opponent's graveyard. If we do choose to go with the previous option, which was Dynamondo, this card allows us to special summon a ritual. If it's special summoned, we can target a card on field and a ritual in our graveyard, shuffle both into deck, so nice removal there. During our opponent's turn, quick effect, we can tribute this card, target a ritual in our graveyard, either add it to hand or special summon it, which is very powerful. But that's pretty much it for the deck. We do have our Bestial Baldrake. If you wanted to cut the cost of the deck, we can cut these thrusts down, and we can just put in a Baldrake or two, you know, straight up a ballin'. So we are able to do something along this line. This is also completely fine, just because all our Dogmatikas are light, and Baldrake and specifically interacts with our lights and our opponent's extra deck stuff in a very beneficial way for us. But yeah, that's about it for the deck. Thank you all so much for watching, if you still are. And thank you to my 1 member. Thank you, Ari. If you wanted to see a deck in the future, please feel free to stop by their Discord. It's going to be at the very end of the video. And suggest decks in the deck suggestion channel. I always take a look at that, and that's where I get most of my new ideas for new decks, other than just, you know, manifesting those shits in my head. But again, thank you all so much for watching, if you still are, and I'll be seeing you all later. Bye-bye! Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you wanted to talk to more Yu-Gi-Oh! Players like yourself, I would highly recommend checking out our Discord server. Link is going to be in the description, as well as the QR code on screen. We do talk somewhat frequently about Yu-Gi-Oh! And the current meta, so I would really enjoy to see you there. As well as we do recently now have channel memberships available on our YouTube channel, where we have 3 different tiers. We have Super Supporter at $2 a month, where you get loyalty badges, emojis, guaranteed comment responses, a shout out at the end of every video, as well as access to the members only Discord channel, where you get early sneak peeks at future videos. There is the Giga Supporter at $5 a month, where you have early access to all new videos about a day or 2 before they go up, as well as all the previous offers. And for $15 a month, we do have our final tier, which is going to be Femboy Fanatic. You get a guaranteed customized video every single month, as well as 1 hour of my time. Could be for anything you'd like. You want a duel? Absolutely. You want me to help build a deck? Absolutely. You want to play some Helldivers? Sure. I'll do anything for an hour once a month. But supporting does help me out quite a lot, and it does help me produce all of these videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be seeing y'all later. Bye-bye.